Thank you. Good evening. My name is Terrence Gilchrist. I'm working toward finishing a master's degree at the Kennedy School of Government. My question is regarding deep systemic change. I'm part of a book club where we discuss the Covenant with Black America. And one of the themes that came out talking about love and quality of service reminds me of Black Sexual Politics by Patricia Hill Collins, where we're talking about how do we love another black person, how do we respect each other and make our community stronger. But one of the questions that came out of our book club as we think about how we're going to make an intervention on a particular topic, our topic is education. How do we organize ourselves and do our fact-finding? And when we go to a public official and want to hold them accountable and say, all right, we got our 10, Black, Covenant with Black America issues, we're going to talk about education, it's only going to go so far. And I'm reminded by what a professor here, Roberta Unger, talks about with humanizing social systems, humanizing democratic systems. It's not enough to humanize it and to add love to it. You want to reframe the discourse, but you have to go further than that. And I'm reminded by what something...
Okay, now, Terrence.
Yes.
What is the question?
Thank you, Professor. And I say this with all my heart. What wisdom can all three of you share about how we may do a deep systemic change that replaces our current social order with one that benefits the human and the planet?
Okay, that is a profound question, and thank you for restating it so elegantly.
It's a profound question. This answer will not be. Let me just say, in the covenant, give just a quick answer, because I'm trying to be as brief as I can to get as many questions covered in the time that we have left here. In the covenant, specifically on the where Terrence, there he is. In the covenant, Terrence and everybody else, on the issue of education, you've read the text, obviously. For those who haven't read it, I recommend it. But I think, and this is not, I don't think this is as radical as some think it is. And again, I am interested in pushing the persons who are now running Congress to see how serious they are about acting as if they believe that we are all created equal, about acting as if they believe that we are all worthy, acting as if they believe that everybody has value. When I asked that question, I wasn't asking a rhetorical question. If in fact we believe that, doesn't that mean that everybody deserves access to an equal high quality education? There's legislation in the House that they've been trying to get off the ground for some time, sponsored principally by Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr. out of Illinois. And what he has argued, I think rather poignantly, and I certainly concur with it, is that we have to start, and again, this stuff doesn't happen overnight, don't get it twisted, but there has to be a conversation. We've got 50, about education, we have 50 different states, that everybody in this room knows, with 50 different ways of doing this education thing. In the state of Washington, because Microsoft and Boeing and Starbucks, et cetera, Amazon, because so many companies have been, are headquartered there now, they have the greatest spending per capita of any state in the union on the issue of education. It ain't rocket science. It makes sense because of the tax base in the state of Washington. By contrast, in a place like Mississippi, where their greatest export, true, is catfish, it means that Negroes in Mississippi, if they're going to get an education, are going to have some really high cholesterol levels. We got to eat a whole lot of catfish sandwiches in Mississippi, in-state and exporting it, to raise the tax base high enough to ever compete, to ever have access to the kind of education. We don't judge outcomes, but at least to start at the same place. We got 50 different ways of doing this. The No Child Left Behind thing is a disaster. It's a disaster. There's money sitting around. There's money sitting around in most of these states. This is true. In the majority of states, there's still money not being spent, money not being allocated, with all this hype about No Child Left Behind. You knew that was a joke to begin with. Whenever the president steals the moniker of the Children's Defense Fund, he done hijacked the election. Now he's hijacking slogans, hijacking countries. I mean, he's out of control. There's got to be a real conversation here, a real conversation about a constitutional amendment that guarantees every child in America access to an equal, high-quality education. Is it pushing the envelope? Yeah, it's pushing the envelope. It's pushing the envelope. But what about getting serious about a conversation on education where every child is guaranteed access to an equal, high-quality education? All right, how do you determine that? Doesn't matter to me. Whatever the best schools are in the country that provide the best for their kids, I'll take some of that. Whatever those schools are, we make that the standard, and everybody in the country gets access to that same equal high quality education. So at least all of our babies start on the same line. But we got to get serious about forcing these conversations that push the envelope a little bit. I think, that's how we start to get at that conversation about how we level the playing field on education.
Just one quick point to it, brother, because that's a profound question. But usually there's three fundamental features that go hand in hand with any deep social change: moment, momentum, and movement. And this is a very framework that Tabitha's Covenant Project is all about. You have to have a moment of awakening. We've been living in an ice age for 45 years where it has been fashionable to be indifferent to the most vulnerable and the most invincible in American society. That's a right-wing moment that they were able to generate in the movement and momentum. We need a democratic awakening from the everyday people, ordinary people, wretched of the earth people point of view, so that people begin to see that the very framework in which they understand the country, you don't look at it from the vantage point of the stock market and Wall Street and so forth. That's the way newspaper, did you notice that labor pages collapsed in the 1970s? It's just all business now. That's already a sign. And you notice when you talk about race, they're never talking about the prison industrial complex. They're never talking about the vicious attack on poor and brown youth when it comes to drugs and so forth and so on. That all you get is just the effects. You don't get the story of that. That has been the ice age in part. We've got to melt that ice age. That's just a moment. The covenant was an attempt to get people to awaken, to constitute a moment. And the next thing is to then generate grassroots momentum for those who have been awakened. And then the next stage is a social movement where you actually then have significant collectivities, insurgency, and so forth. So we've got a long way to go. None of us are born under circumstances of our own choosing. We just happen to be born in young folk ice age. Sorry about that. Reagan, Bush, that's what you emerged under, right? I grew up, things were hot. I'm still on fire, but things were hot. It's a different context. It was Martin, it was Angela Davis, it was Huey Newton, and so forth and so on. I'm not nostalgic about it. They made mistakes, they were gallant. We got 2006, we got our precious children that we have to take care of. How do we get momentum, movement to turn things around given the ice age that's been in place?